Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with my full review of the the LSA HP-2 headphone. Sorry it's been a while, been really busy with work and trying to get back into this headphone thing, but doing the best I can. Sorry for the delay between the videos. Anyway, this is the LSA HP-2. LSA stands for Living Sound Audio. This headphone is made for LSA by Kennerton Audio Equipment out of St. Petersburg, Russia. And I've done reviews on several Kennerton headphones, and this one is actually very similar, sort of an updated and improved version of the Kennerton Magni. Actually, Kennerton came out with a new headphone recently, and I do not know how to pronounce it. It is spelled G-J-A-L-L-A-R-H-O-R-N. Gallahorn, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. It's the GH50 model, and it is, according to Kennerton, the world's first horn-loaded headphone. And this is basically very similar. They are a little bit different. This has a wood back on it, and the Kennerton has a leather back, but I believe the internals, the driver, all that are very similar. Anyway, this headphone retails at $1,200, but the intro price, when I did my first impressions about, I don't know how long ago that was, at least a month ago, I believe I said the intro price was $750 at that time, and I believe it's $799 now. So it has gone up a little bit, and I'd imagine, you know, they call it an intro price, so I imagine that that price will go up at some point. Anyway, this is a wired, full-size, over-the-ear, closed-back design. It uses a 50mm dynamic driver, which I guess is made of, or at least coated with graphene, which is same as or similar to the driver that was used in the Kennerton Magni, and that was, at the time, I think either the first or one of the first headphones to use graphene in a driver. It is a dynamic, if I didn't say it already, it's a 50mm dynamic driver. The impedance, and I'm not sure where I got these specs from, because the last time I looked at the LSA website, I didn't see these specs, and they're not quite the same as the Kennerton version, but I'm getting these specs from my first impressions video, and I thought I got these specs from their website at that time. So anyway, as far as I know, I believe this headphone has an impedance of 33 ohms and a sensitivity of 105 decibels at 1 milliwatt. The weight, and this is my measured weight, comes in at 366 grams, which is actually exceptionally light, and actually about 30 grams lighter than the Kennerton Magni. This headphone comes with a 2-meter cable, and like the headphone, I believe it's made by Kennerton. I think it even says Kennerton on it somewhere. But anyway, it's 2 meters long, it's cloth covered, it's soft, it's comfortable, it's not scratchy. It does come with a 6.3mm or 1/4 inch single-ended connection at the amp end, and at the headphone end it uses 3.5mm connections, and this is a nice cable. It's got nice metal connectors, and I don't know if you can see it, but one is marked with a little red ring and the other is a blue ring, so you can tell left from right. But anyway, they are 3.5mm, which has become pretty much standard in most headphones lately. Most of the headphones I've reviewed, probably in the last year, have either been 3.5mm or a 4-pin mini XLR connection. The headphone itself uses the ear cups are wooden. They're not a veneer. This is solid wood. The main part of the ear cup is curly maple, and the backing on it is a darker wood. I don't know if it's a walnut or something like that, but anyway, it's all wood. The ear cups, or the ear pads, are made of real lambskin leather. They're very soft, very comfortable. They're not tapered front to back. There is not, as far as I can tell, a front and back on this headphone. It does have an L on one side and an R on the other side, so or you can just tell by the cable, but I don't think it matters either way. But you know, of course, I put the red where on the side marked with R, and then you can just look at that or the color to know which way to put these on. The headband is sort of a spring steel. It's a little bit different than the one on the Magni. It's a sort of a different material. Maybe it's not steel, maybe. I'm not sure what it is. It might be aluminum, but the headphone is a little bit lighter. The headband is self-adjusting and also covered with lambskin leather. And these headphones, well, they do swivel this way, and there's a little bit of flex that way. And they are very comfortable. They're very lightweight. The weight is very evenly distributed, and I almost feel like I don't have headphones on. These are probably one of the most comfortable headphones I've ever worn. I mean, 365 grams is exceptionally light for a full-size over-the-ear headphone. They do have pretty decent isolation from outside noise. They do, I mean, that's the advantage to a closed back headphone. They do a pretty good job of keeping outside noise out, and they do a pretty good job of keeping inside music from coming out and disturbing other people. You know, if I take these while they're playing and push them together like that, there's very little sound coming out. I mean, they're not going to bother someone unless they're, you know, right next to you laying in bed or something. But, you know, and these are, because they are so efficient, these could be used with a portable. So, you know, this could be a headphone that you wear out in public or whatever. It's light, it's comfortable, and very easy to drive. And I'll talk about that in a little while as far as amps, because it really doesn't take a lot of amp for this headphone. It doesn't take a lot of power, and you know, they respond pretty good, you know, to lower priced amps. I mean, it is such a good headphone though that it does scale up with a better amp, so you know, I'll talk about that in a few minutes, the equipment I used. In fact, I'll talk about that right now. The equipment I used was, my music source was CDs, and I used a Cambridge Audio 540C CD player used as a transport only. I run a digital signal from that to a Benchmark Media DAC1, and then my analog signal from that to various different amps. I did use the amp built into the DAC1, which would be the HP-2 amp, and that was actually sold separately at one time and was about a $300 amp, and that amp is very adequate for this headphone, makes it sound outstanding. Most of my listening was done with the Audio GD Master 9, which is my primary amp, and I used both the single-ended output with the cable that came with this headphone, and I also had a Kennerton cable with a 4-pin XLR connection, and use the balanced output of the amp to, you know, get the absolute best out of these. I also tried this with the Felix Audio Echo, and had pretty good results with that too. Some of the headphones that I compared this to, and I'll get into detail on, you know, talk about each one separate in a few minutes, but I compared this, of course, to the Kennerton Magni, which is the headphone that this is based on. It's sort of a newer, updated version. But I also compared this to the Kennerton Woden, which is about a $2,500 headphone, and at $799, it's not a very fair comparison, but this headphone is so detailed that I wanted to compare it to one of the most detailed headphones I had ever heard, and that is the Woden, to see if it was in the same league as the Woden. Also compared this to a couple of other headphones that are more in the same price range. That would be the Hi-Fi Man HE-560, which originally sold for $8.99, and I think I got my pair for $4.99 when they were being clearance. But the HE-560 is still one of my favorites, and it is a very good headphone when amped correctly. It is very power hungry and does not reach its full potential unless you put a lot of power into it, which would be the Audio GD Master 9 or the Emotiva A100 Bass amp with the jumpers installed is also a real good option with that headphone. But this headphone is much easier to drive, and you don't need the amp behind it like you do with the HE-560. Also compared this a little bit to the Hi-Fi Man Sundara, which I think is currently selling for about $350, originally retailed at $4.99. Anyway, the music I listened to while reviewing this was pretty much my typical mixture of some rock, classic rock, some harder stuff, some pop, some electronic music, a lot of acoustical music, especially acoustical with female vocals. That's one of my favorite ways of testing and reviewing headphones, and then a little bit of orchestral music. When I did my first video, I think I mentioned that I only had about 3 or 4 hours on these headphones. Well, I've had these for quite a while now. I've had them for at least a month, maybe a month and a half, and in the last week, actually a couple weeks, I put a lot of listening time in these. I put several hours just in the last week alone, and I think, you know, my opinions haven't changed much from my first video, but my opinions are reinforced now. I stand behind them with, more intensity because I have spent the time with the headphone, and I do, I'm more sure about my evaluation on it. So I'll get into that. I'll start with tone balance. And the tone balance on this, I said in my first video that it was pretty much dead neutral, and I still agree with that. It's about as neutral as they come. I'm not hearing any peaks or valleys anywhere. Nothing's lacking, nothing is exaggerated or overemphasized. Just the tone balance is very well balanced. It extends well into the bass, but the bass isn't emphasized at all. So if you are a bass head looking for a headphone with exaggerated bass, then this probably isn't the headphone for you. This is a very neutral, very accurate headphone. As far as frequency extension, on the top it seems to extend very well into the treble. I hear no roll off at all. Into the bass, this is where this headphone is exceptional. The sub bass extension on this is outstanding. This thing goes really deep into the sub bass, and that's one of the comparisons I want to make to the Magni, because the Magni from Kennerton up until now had the best sub bass that I have ever heard. Not the most sub bass. There's other headphones like the Meza 99 Classic, the 3 Spirit Torino headphones I listened to had more sub bass, but it wasn't the quality of the Magni. The Magni had exceptionally clean, undistorted, very tight sub bass, and this headphone actually goes even lower and has even more weight to the sub bass than the Magni. The bass, like I said, is it's very deep. It's very solid, it's very tight, but it's not emphasized. So, like I said, nice flat tone balance on this. The mids, they're balanced and they're exceptionally clean. That is what this headphone is all about, is clean, undistorted, balanced sound that, like I said, nothing emphasized, no dips, nothing missing. The treble is extended. Once again, it's clean, it's crisp, it's crystal clear, and it has a nice sparkle to it. Not rolled off at all, but not emphasized, not harsh, not in your face. Never sounds, it's not fatiguing. That's the main thing. It just, the treble's just about perfect on these, in my impression, or in my opinion. As far as detail and resolution, that is this headphone's absolute strong point. This headphone has exceptional detail and resolution. It is up there with any headphone I have heard at any price. I'm talking headphones like the Kennerton Woden, $2,500 headphone, Kennerton Thror, $3,400 headphone, Hi-Fi Man Aria, $1,600 headphone, Erzatish Phobos, which is what, about, I think, a $2,200 headphone. It's even, compared to like the Mesa Imperium, this has more detail than the Imperium. The Imperium sounds kind of veiled compared to this. I mean, this thing has an exceptionally clean, clear, detailed, all the way through the frequency range, but where I really notice it is in the mids and lower treble, and especially female vocals. And like I said, I really like to listen to acoustical music with female vocals. Some examples would be Tori Amos, Sarah McLachlan, Natalie Merchant, you know, but just about any female vocals. This headphone, the detail in their voice is second to none. Like I said, price doesn't matter, and I realize I haven't heard every headphone out there. There's a lot of, you know, high-end headphones that I haven't heard yet, so I can't compare them to everything. But the two headphones that I have found that I've reviewed so far, if you go back and look at my list, I think I have 107 videos now. If you go back and look at my list of all the headphones I've reviewed, the two most detailed are the Kennerton Woden, the Kennerton Thror, and also I'll throw in the Erzatish Phobos, and the Hi-Fi Man Ria isn't too far behind, but it's not quite on the level of the first three. Anyway, this headphone is up there with the best as far as detail and resolution. I haven't heard anything better. As far as imaging, the imaging is pinpoint, exact, and I can locate every instrument exactly where it is in space. Nothing is blended together, nothing is smeared, just each instrument, the voices, everything, just in a distinct location that, I mean, I can point right to each instrument when I'm listening to this. The sound stage, it, like the Magni, it does lack a little bit in soundstage width compared to an open back, but this is probably has the widest soundstage of any closed back I've heard so far. It's not quite up there with the best of the open backs, but for a closed back, it's very, very good as far as width. And in fact, it has as much width as a lot of open back headphones. As far as height, it has good height. I'm hearing things up here, I'm hearing things down here, and in depth, it has very good depth and very good layering. I'm hearing a three-dimensional soundstage where I can locate instruments at different distances. You know, some are out here, some are up closer. It's very detailed and layered, and probably the only headphone that I've heard that has the three-dimensional layering that this does would be the Kennerton Thror at about four times the price. So the soundstage, it's lacking a little bit of width, but that's expected from a closed back. You're not going to get exceptional soundstage width from a closed back. So, I mean, I can't complain at all. I mean, I like to have a good closed back headphone to listen to when, you know, there's other people around I don't want to disturb, or if there's a little bit of background noise that I can't, you know, get rid of. And I mean, it's well worth it, you know, giving up a little slight bit of soundstage. I mean, compared to like the Kennerton Woden that has a huge soundstage, no, it's not as wide, but the depth and the height is probably just as good. The dynamics of this is actually a very dynamic headphone. The music just jumps out at you. I mean, it doesn't slam you in the head, it doesn't become fatiguing, but it's not soft. I mean, compared to, you know, some other headphones that have a much softer sound, this does have a dynamic, punchy sound. There's no doubt about that. I did want to compare this a little bit to a few other headphones. Excuse me. You have to forgive me. It's well, what is it, September now, but still very hot in my house, and I don't have air conditioning in my office, and I think it's currently about 89 degrees in here, and starting to break out in the sweat a little bit, so you have to forgive me. Anyway, compared to the Kennerton Magni, the Kennerton Magni is a headphone that I absolutely love. In fact, if you watched my best of 2019 video, I rated the Kennerton Magni. It got my vote for the headphone of the year, the best headphone deal of the year, the most bang for the buck of any headphone that I had listened to. Not every headphone on the market, because obviously I haven't heard them all, but of all the headphones that I had heard up to that point, the Kennerton Magni got my vote for the best headphone of the year. Very neutral, very good bass extension, closed back, very easy to drive, just a little bit of a small sound stage. When I first heard this, it didn't sound a whole lot different from the Magni to me. I kind of questioned, you know, what was the point of it. I put it on, and, you know, it sounded a little bit different, and I had a little bit of trouble at first, you know, actually describing the difference. But now that I've got some time on it, I think I can do a better job. And the more time I put on it, the more difference I did hear. The first thing I wanted to talk about, as far as the difference between this and the Magni, is the Magni, I always said, had exceptional sub bass. This is even better. On most music that I've listened to, the sub bass on this extends even lower and has more weight to it than the Magni. I'm not talking a drastic, huge difference, but there is a difference. It is noticeable. This does go a little bit lower and has a little more weight in the sub bass, and this now has become my #1 pick for sub bass extension of any headphone I've heard. Like I said, not the most sub bass, but the best, cleanest, tightest, most solid sub bass that I've heard. It's not going to overwhelm you, and if you're a bass head, you're probably going to find it lacking because it's balanced with the rest of the sound. It's not, you know, like, you know, going to a dance club. It's not going to be that kind of bass that overwhelms you, or like, you know, being in a car with 15-inch subwoofers or something like that. It's not that kind of bass. It's just a very neutral, very clean, very extended, very tight, solid sub bass. Also, comparing this to the Magni, Magni has an exceptional mid-range. This goes a little bit beyond the Magni in detail. The Magni is right up there with the best, but this is even goes a little bit further. The detail, especially in the mid-range, upper mid-range, female vocals on this, not drastically better, but it is slightly better than the Magni. After listening to this, going back to the Magni, female vocals just sound like they have, I don't want to say veiled because the Magni is exceptional, but this is just so good that it's even better than the Magni in detail and female vocals. I just hear more detail and texture in their voices, and it's just exceptional. Like I said, there's only a couple headphones I've heard, and they're 2, 3, 4 times the price that are on the same level as this in the detail in the female vocals and upper mid-range. This is just exceptional. The treble on this, it sounds to me very similar to the Magni. The mid-bass sounds about the same. Male vocals don't sound much different. The Magni, the mid-range, where female vocals are, sounds slightly warmer and a little more forgiving, where this is a little more detailed, and if the recording has any harshness in it, you will hear it with this headphone. So that's the one weakness of this headphone, is it's so revealing that if you listen to a bad recording, you're going to hear all the flaws and faults in that recording. So you know, it's not as forgiving as some headphones are. You know, if you want to listen to, you know, some poor recordings, you're probably going to pick a different headphone than this. You know, something that's not going to bring out all the detail. Compared to the Woden, and once again, the Woden by Kennerton is about a $2,500 headphone. It's also an open back. The Woden, without a doubt, has a wider soundstage. It has a huge soundstage. But the strongest point of the Woden is the exceptional clarity and detail, and this headphone is right up there with the Woden in detail. Clarity, resolution, it is right there. The Woden has a wider soundstage, but this might actually have more depth to the soundstage. A tiny bit, not much. It's pretty close. The Woden, I think, has a little more height to the soundstage, but this one place this does beat the Woden is in bass extension. This goes lower and has more weight in the sub bass than the Woden. Comparing this to the Hi-Fi Man Sandara, first of all, this is way easier to drive, takes far less power than the Sandara, has way better bass extension. The Sandara I would consider pretty much neutral, but it does roll off when you get into the sub bass. It kind of lacks. Where this has way better bass extension. This is, I think, pretty close to the same weight. The Sandara is comfortable. This has nicer ear pads on it, though. This has real leather ear pads, a lot more comfortable. The Sandara is very detailed, but it doesn't sound the same as this. This has every bit or more detail than the Sandara, but it just sounds cleaner. When I switch from this to the Sandara, I listen to, you know, the mid-range instruments, especially I notice it in pianos, and I notice it in, once again, female vocals, where they just sound cleaner from this. It just sounds more pure and more real, and that's what this headphone is all about. Everything I listen to out of this just sounds so real. It sounds less like a recording and more like I'm really there. Especially voices. This just makes everything sound more real than most headphones I've heard, especially anything in the price range. Compared to the HE-560, which, like I said, is extremely hard to drive. Not up there in HE6 range, but it's still very hard. A lot of people, I don't think, appreciate that headphone because they've never hooked it up to an amp with enough power to really appreciate the way it can sound. When properly amped, it has much better bass and sounds way more dynamic. Anyway, once again, like the Sandara, this just has more detail and more clarity all the way through the frequency response, but especially upper mid-range, lower treble, female vocals. It just sounds it sounds noticeably cleaner and more real than the HE-560. And the HE-560 actually has pretty good sub-bass extension. Much better. It's better than the Sandara or the HE-500. That is if it's properly amped. The HE-560 does have good sub-bass extension, but this is definitely better. It goes lower and it has more weight to the sub-bass. And that's actually one of the strong points of the 560 is that sub-bass, and this is better at it. The Hi-Fi Man Aria, I wish I could compare these two directly. I don't have the Aria here. Sent it up to one of my moderators a long time ago, and he liked it so much that I'll probably never see it again. But anyway, from what I can remember of the Aria, this headphone sounds very, very similar. The tone balance is very similar. The Aria has good sub-bass extension, probably the best I've heard from any planar magnetic headphone. This has even better sub-bass extension than the Aria. It goes a little bit lower, it has a little more weight. This has every bit or more of the detail of the Aria, pretty much that same almost perfect tone balance. I've never even been tempted to EQ this. I love it just the way it is. The Aria, the one flaw I heard with the Aria is female vocals can sometimes sound slightly sibilant through the Aria to me. Just a little bit of hiss on the end of each syllable. And this does not have that. So actually, I would say that the mid-range is even cleaner than the Aria on this. The one big advantage the Aria has is it is known, and I agree, that it has a huge soundstage width. It's really wide, probably one of the widest sound stages I've ever heard of any headphone. This being a closed back, no, it does not have that width. But this, without a doubt, has more depth and a more three-dimensional sound stage than the Aria. Okay, the Aria is one of the most comfortable headphones I've ever heard. I think it weighs in at about 420 grams. It's actually a little heavier. This headphone is just as comfortable as the Aria, in my opinion. So basically, I think this headphone, other than soundstage width, holds its own or beats the Aria in just about every way at half the price. So I'm going to be honest, last year the Kennerton Magni was my headphone of the year, most bang for the buck, and I think it sold for $769 or something like that. Okay, this headphone right now at this point is my #1 contender for headphone of the year for 2020. From what I've heard and what I haven't. This headphone, the only flaw I hear with this headphone is a slightly narrower sound stage than better open back headphones, but that should be expected from a closed back. And it's just so detailed that it's a little bit unforgiving. It's not fatiguing, it's never harsh, it never causes me any pain, it's not too bright in my opinion. But it is so detailed in the mid-range and lower treble that crappy recordings are going to sound crappy. That's all there is to it. So you might end up just listening to your best recordings with this headphone and choose something a little less revealing for less than perfect recordings. So in my opinion, that's its only weakness. This is, especially for the price, pretty much as close as I can imagine to perfect for a headphone. And in fact, I like this headphone so much that I've already talked to LSA about buying this headphone and keeping it for my own personal use and my own reference for a closed back headphone. And like I said, this thing is super easy to drive. You should have no trouble driving it with a portable. It doesn't take a lot of amp. Even the little Atom, what's the name of that? The JDS Atom amp. Even that does more than, does a very well job of driving this. It sounded best from the Audio GD Master 9 hooked up to the balance output. It gave it a little bit bigger soundstage and more three-dimensional soundstage, but it also sounded fantastic from the basically $300 amp built into the Benchmark Deck 1. And it also sounded really, really good with the Felix Audio Echo, which is an OTL type of tube amp. And surprisingly, that amp, normally people don't recommend an OTL with low impedance headphones. That amp actually works really well with some of the low impedance headphones I've heard. And some of them, it actually, especially the Grotto SR80E, I think that amp turns it into a completely different headphone that sounds more like a $300 or $400 headphone to me instead of $99. Anyway, many headphones I've listened to that are low impedance with that amp actually gain a little bit of bass. It doesn't really change the tone balance at all. This stays pretty much exactly the way it sounds with the solid state with the OTL, but it might have a little bit more of a three-dimensional sound with the Felix Audio Echo. So it's actually a real good combination. It does work. But basically, any decent solid state amp should work really well with this headphone. So what it comes down to, do I recommend this? And absolutely yes. Like I said, this is just pretty much, it's one of the best headphones I've heard at any price, and is pretty much as good as I could expect any headphone to sound at $799. I mean, it is just outrageously good in my opinion. I highly recommend it, and this very well could end up my headphone of the year for 2020. So that's the bottom line. This is an outstanding headphone in my opinion. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and please join us over at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. We're up to almost 9,100 members. Thanks for watching my video.